FreeForm Pro allows you to create complex deformations. It's a great plugin to transform your footage into 3D shapes and create interesting animations. Again, like other plugins, there's a lot to cover, and the movie will only look at the surface of what this plugin has to offer.
So if you're looking to follow along in the next two movies and see some 3D enhancements inside of After Effects, let's simply head to metal.com, go to the product section, and under the product section, we can go to the 3D plugins for After Effects and choose FreeForm Pro. This is going to bring us to the area where we can download a demo version. And you're going to do the same thing in the next movie for AE Shapeshifter. You can also find a ton of information on this website. There's tons of tutorial contents going in depth of how you can use both of these products and other things that Metal has to offer for After Effects. But for now, follow along with me. I'm going to close out my webpage and head back into After Effects into my Chapter 4.4 composition. I've got a couple layers here, but a word of caution. I'm actually using some 3D plugins inside of After Effects in order to use this project. So my displacement layer is actually using Universe's textures. And just to show you here as well, I've got a reflection map from Element 3D. Now you can find these images online. I'm actually going to just turn on my reflection map. And I'm also going to solo it just to show it to you. It is a HDRI image, is what it's referred to on Google. And you can download these to use commercially and non-commercially by doing the appropriate Google search. The same thing for the texture that I'm using if you don't have Universe installed in your system. So if you don't have Universe or Element 3D, you can't follow along, but you can easily download this. Let's select FreeForm Pro though. And I've already done a search in my effects and presets for Metal FreeForm Pro. And I'm going to apply Metal FreeForm Pro by selecting it and placing it on the texture. What's happened is there's a grid right now that will help us distort this image. But if we go to the grid settings here in Effect Controls, it's divided into a series of 2 rows and 2 columns, which I'm going to change to 3 rows and 3 columns. So you can see that change happened right away. Now, in my composition window, I can actually click one of these points and drag them to create some distortion there inside my composition window. I can also go to the grid control points into row 1. And I want to select the second Z position because I want to make sure that this distortion happens on Z. And I'm going to make the amount 200. Now to really see this clearly, we can see that it has happened, but I have a camera inside the project. We're going to hit the C key to now orbit around the scene. And once we do, we can clearly see that distortion out in 3D space. So let's change this amount from 200 and actually do the exact opposite. I'm going to change this to negative 300, that second Z position. You can see the control point and effects. And as I orbit around the scene, you can see that we can create some pretty cool looks by simply adjusting the Z position values under the grid control points to get various looks. But on top of that, let's actually reset FreeForm Pro. And we also want to reset our camera. So I'm going to go into my project, select the camera, hit P for position, right click and choose reset to have the camera's position right on bat. Now I want to select FreeForm Pro, and other ways of creating distortion are to use displacement layers. And I have a displacement layer here in my project. You can see I'm just currently about to select it. And if I double click it, I go inside and I got this little lovely airplane. So here you can see a fighter plane, and a few effects have been added to the fighter plane. I got this from the Creative Cloud Marketplace, so you can download this asset for free if it's not in your exercise files. So I took this image that was originally black and I actually inverted it to the color white. This color white is what's going to be used to identify the areas that we want to displace. I also added a fast blur that you can see here to blur out the images so that the displacement isn't so harsh. And you can also see here that there is a tint effect, but we're going to come back to that shortly. Let's head back to the Chapter 4.4 composition. And inside this, we're going to go into FreeForm Pro and into the displacement mapping and use the displacement pre-comp to displace the layer. So I'm going to go here and choose this from none and change this to displacement. And voila, we see our airplane. I want to increase its height a little bit by changing this amount to 200. And this is going to now be extruded outwards, as you can see as I orbit around the scene. Okay, so our background has disappeared, but we can easily go down into this section to the contours and change the threshold to 0%. And that's going to now reveal the background, and we can see the airplane basically extruding outward from that background. Now to kind of increase the quality of this displacement, let's first of all decrease the displacement height to 100. And let's head over into the tessellation section and increase the subdivisions to 250. Now that that is increased, we have a slightly better quality there of our extrusion and displacement inside our layer. All right, and let's close out a few of these sections to see a few more options available. I'm going to head to the reflection map. We saw this earlier. This is the element 3D image. And I want this reflection to, of course, shine on my FreeForm Pro layer, basically reflect on my FreeForm Pro layer. So with this selected, I'm going to head down into the reflection mapping section. And in the reflection mapping section, I want to change the reflection layer to the reflection map. Right away, the reflection is way too strong for our tastes. But what we can do is change the reflection blending mode to have it integrate in with our texture. So I'm going to change the reflecting blending to overlay. Excellent. You can see there my project auto-saving in the background. And this is a mixture of our texture mixed with that reflection map there in the background. Now let me give you the case where maybe what we want to do is have the background have the reflection, but not our airplane layer. What we could do is use other color channels to create this effect. So if I go back to my displacement map pre-composition and go in here to turn on the tint, I want to change the color of the airplane to red. And I can use this red channel to I basically identify this as, let's say, something that I want to add something to or something that I don't want to appear in this area. So if I go back to the chapter 4.4 composition, notice that the airplane actually got a little bit smaller. That's because in the displacement section, once we go into FreeForm Pro and take a look at our displacement mapping, you can see that it's going to be mapped to the luminance channels rather than the red channel. So if I go into the displacement mapping, we're just going to simply change the use layers RGB, Luma. We're going to change that over to red. And now that it's using the red channel, we get back the same amount of extrusion we had earlier, displacement. I'm also going to go to the displacement map channels, head down to use for reflection, and change this value from none to red inverted, because I don't want the reflection to show up in the plane. It's only going to show up in the background once I select that. As you can see, my plane is free from reflections while my background is filled with them. So keep in mind you can use channels to isolate reflections or other shininess and speculativeness to certain areas. Let's actually go and reset our camera position, selecting position and hitting reset. And I want to also reset the FreeForm Pro effect, just back to square one to show you one more final thing with this effect. So besides all of this, we actually have primitives under FreeForm Pro that we can use to create displacement. So I'm going to head down to the primitives section. This was added in a newer version of FreeForm Pro. And in the primitives section, I'm going to change the render primitives from none to cubes. And while not seen so clearly, I'm going to bring down the size of these cubes from 50, in fact, to 6, 6, and 6. And we can see a bunch of cubes spread out in a grid of X and Y. To see this even clearer, let's go to the grid X and Y in this section, bring that down to 10 in both X and Y, and increase the scale of our primitives to 20 in X, Y, and Z. Once I start to orbit around the scene with my camera, we see that our image is currently being displaced by a series of cubes, or a series of cubes are now forming our image. So you can use these primitives to kind of create some interesting effects right here in FreeForm Pro. Metal.com has a ton and a wealth of information online, so go there to find out more about what you can do with the latest version of FreeForm Pro.